because that's what it really is. So, we have got a panel. I got to be in a phone call with this panel. We have political leaders, Republican and Democrat. It's hard to just raise your hand and be a Republican.
I go to this church.
And I want to hear from this panel, you do too. Because I heard some stuff in the call that I was like, for you all to hear. So I'm going to just give some opening remarks to set the tone for the panel, but also for today. I'm Jim Wallace, I should say, and I'm really pleased that Georgetown just named my new chair there. Again, the Episcopal connection. It's now, I'm the Archbishop Desmond Tutu Chair of Faith and Justice. Director of the Senate. When Georgetown plays like that, takes your two favorite words, faith and justice. Nice and chair in the center, you're a happy camper. So I'm coming to you from there, going back there tonight. Now, when you have a pastor or a preacher open something up, you normally get a text. So I have a text to start this morning. I think it's a foundation for the whole day. We are surrounded by political noise. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Political noise. Polls, and pundits, and attacks, and negative ads. I often feel surrounded by the noise. And when I do, I like to go to the first chapter of the first book of the Bible, Genesis 1:26. So think of the noise that we're all surrounded with. And then let's go to that text. And the text says, then God said. Just that. I like it. Be quiet, noise. Then God said. And what does God say? Let us create humankind in our own image and after our own likeness. Right there. That's how we start. Creation starts with God making all of us, humankind, after God's image and likeness. So, I'm part of a movement called Faith United to Save Democracy, and we're in 10 states, including Georgia, and Cynthia Hale, Rising Hope, is our lead person here in Georgia, and we're training poll chaplains to go to polling places where voter suppression, intimidation is being threatened, always poor minority precincts. And we're training hundreds, we've trained 1,000 so far. And I always do the opening moral framing of those trainings. And I go to this text and I say, what that means, this text, is that any assault on someone's right to vote, their access, counting a vote, corrupting a vote, intimidating a vote, any attack on the precious vote of any of our citizens is nothing less than an assault on Imago Dei, the image of God. This is theological, not just political. This is theological. And so I want to name those things. So, white Christian nationalism, I get asked all the time, what do you mean? Well, the name spells the problem. The most inclusive, welcoming, inviting vision message on the planet, where the church is growing in the global south everywhere, somehow becomes a white preference. Or Christian, but they don't mean service and sacrifice, they mean control, domination. Some of you theologians know the old dominionist theology. This stuff isn't new. It's making a comeback. Because we are closer to a multiracial democracy than we've ever been. We'd be the first in the world to do that. And that's why those who don't want that are fighting back by any means necessary. Then nationalists. I was speaking somewhere lately, and a nervous introducer, young woman, she said, yeah, Jim Wallace, he started Sojourners in 1871. It's a whole joke for us time to tell how old I was. So I said, well, I wasn't there for the great ascension of Christ, but I read about it. And he said, go into all the world, make disciples in every nation. Nationalist, nation worship, America first, is theologically an idolatry. Let's name it for what it is. And what I'm feeling now is an effort to not just confront that, but to reclaim, particularly in my tradition, reclaim the teachings of Jesus. That's Christian nationalism in my tradition versus Jesus. It's really that kind of choice. Now, other traditions in this room, we need all of us to do this. And so I'm going to just give you one little story from the text, from the scriptures. A lawyer came to Jesus in Luke, and he says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said, I think you know. It's in the law, you read it. You love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And you love your neighbor as yourself. Now, my deep study of that text has revealed to me the lawyer was a Washington lawyer. I mean, I know that tone of voice. And his question of Jesus is the most important question for democracy. Who is my neighbor? Not who is my neighbor, but exactly who do I have obligations to? So Jesus uses the story, this parable of the Good Samaritan. Now remember, in that Judean culture where he was teaching, those folks didn't think there were any Good Samaritans. They're mixed race. They're half-breed, they're dangerous, they're destructive, they're false worship. In fact, the Samaritans, they're in cartels in Mexico, and they're making drugs, and no, that's a different group. But they're othered, just like we see so many people othered now. The Samaritans were othered, and here's his best example of a good neighbor. Is one who was othered in the society. And the Jewish scholars tell me the man by the side of the road was, in fact, Jewish. He stops to help one who is other to him. Now, right there, there was a whole conversation about democracy and what it is in this country. So, I'm going to get to this panel because I want you to hear from them. Briefly, you can see in your program, we have Shirley Franklin, former mayor of Atlanta. It says D. Is that Governor Brown?
Yeah.
Just check. Leader of the Democratic Defense Project. Saxby Chambliss, who I remember from Washington. Former senior U.S. Senator in Georgia. R. That's Republican right now. Also, the Democracy Defense Project. Edward Lindsay, Jr., partner of Denton's Public Policy and Regulation Head of Georgia State Government Affairs, Denton's former representative, Georgia State House of Representatives. Right? And you were involved in this whole new thing about vote counting. We'll say a word about that.
I had it twice.
Yeah. This is expert testimony for us. Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, Georgia State House of Representatives, D, Democrat, and to have the spiritual chaplaincy of all this, the Right Reverend Dr. Mark Andrus, Episcopal Diocese of California, we have been before. So it's great to have all of you. So I just want to hear from you about this threat to democracy. I think it's also a test of faith, a test of democracy and a test of faith. What is each of you, that threat at core? What's for you most concerning? Or maybe what keeps you up at night? We got 6 weeks until an election. What keeps you up at night? Let's start here.
I think that, yes, it's on. Well, the short answer to that is apathy and disengagement and fear that people have of being engaged in the political process, or actually just in the community that they live in. So the single focus of making a living, taking care of yourself, and going through the challenges. So apathy, disengagement, and how widespread it is across many constituencies.
Which makes people want to just stay home or sit down or become cynical. In my class yesterday at Georgetown, all these young people, they talked about cynicism, which they're struggling with as a generation. And I said, the powers that be want us to be cynical and pull out of the process and stay home. And there's a real battle going on at Georgetown among students about that very thing. They said, what keeps you awake?
I had one, but when I turned it on, that was the feedback you all got. So, thank you. Jim, your question, the most important question about democracy, who is my neighbor, that's the one that keeps me up at night. The climate crisis and the democracy crisis is at root, both of them are spiritual crises. They are at root spiritual crises. It starts in the human heart, and it ends in the human heart. And there have been 2 great democracies that have lasted 200 years or more, only 2 in the history of humanity. One was Athens, and we are living in one of them. And it's in peril, of course, as we know. And neither of those democracies, the one we lived in, nor that of Athens, was able to incorporate all of the people into the democracy. So in Athens, women were not they were not citizens, slaves were not citizens. In our country, of course, we began by excluding Black Americans. Women didn't have the vote, on and on it goes. And of course, there's an economic barrier to participation in democracy. So there's a great theologian, political scientist at the University of California, Berkeley, who has created a center there called the Center of Othering and Belonging. Othering and belonging. We want to move towards belonging, and that's what keeps me up at night, is the desire for that, and we have a name for it. When all belong, it's the beloved community.
You know, that belonging question, I think is so important you raise it. We had a hate summit at the White House, and I met this former militiaman who had left. And what he said to me was, when I was that kid in the alley, my parents both worked, they were never there. I'm on my own. And the guy that came down the alley to talk to me didn't ever talk ideology. He talked about purpose, meaning, belonging to a community. That's what drew me in. I didn't have belonging. I didn't have purpose or meaning. That's what drew me in. And as he got older, he left all of it for all the right reasons. But we, particularly congregations, isn't that what we're about? Offering belonging. So it isn't just you're wrong and I'm right, or labeling and cancel culture on both sides. It's where are people finding their belonging? That's such a critical point. Madam Mayor.
Good morning. Welcome to All Saints. This is my home church. I grew up here. And when I was a very small child, on the vestry was AJC editor Ralph Miguel and Judge Elbert Tuttle. So there's some good bones around this church, and I'm happy to be here with all of you. I am very honored also to be on this panel. It is an impressive panel. I'm enjoying this discussion. Thank you again, Amanda, for all of this. I'm worried this week about October 1st, 9 a.m. October 1st. The Fulton County Superior Court judge is going to hear the court challenge to the rules imposed by the State Election Board. Ed, to my right, can talk a little bit more about that since he served on that board. But I am very much in the weeds right now about our threat to democracy, and I am communicating with my Republican friends often, sometimes in pleadings, sometimes I communicate with them in the pleadings in court, and sometimes I just talk to them. I am most worried, though, not about what the judge will do Tuesday, because I have more confidence in the court system than maybe I should at this point. But I'm worried about the cynicism and isolation of young people. That's my general worry. Whether the children of those gentlemen working on the roof that I'm watching carefully to see they're safe, or whether it's the children of the privileged folks in this room, there is a level of isolation, a level of despair that is symptomatic of many things that I cannot have an immediate opportunity to cure. But I'm very worried about that in terms of whether or not they choose to vote. I have a pattern, good or bad pattern, you can judge it. Out and about in my business community, there's 60 restaurants in Decatur, and I always ask my wait staff in this election thing, do you mind if I ask you a question? I always start that way with a low voice. And they're going to say yes because I'm a customer, might tell them. And I say, may I ask you if you plan on voting in on November 5th? And I get very interesting responses. And what I had the hope of, even though I'm probably guessing correctly maybe, that I'm the only person that's going to ask them that this week or this month, that they might have a brief opportunity to have a conversation or a thought about will they participate. The volunteer act of many of my friends of going door to door, actually knocking on doors, which I've done over several decades, it's the most high-quality experience that any candidate can ever have. Surely that's what I think. The fascination of how people respond when an actual elected folks like us knock on their door gives me sometimes some hope and sometimes not. It's fascinating ways. I'm just going to suggest to you, thank you for being here, but also in terms of our day-to-day life in the next 6 weeks, less than 6 weeks now, is it possible to just ask people in a very soft voice, in a very polite way, do they plan on voting? And see if there's an opportunity to have some positive discussion. October 1st is also the 100th birthday of Jimmy Carter. And I would like to, those of us, many of us in this room love him. He is the best example of faith in public life I've ever seen. And I recommend to you, and then I'll close, my favorite book that he wrote is Turning Point, about his first election in 1963, following Baker v. Carr. He was elected to the state senate, where I had also an opportunity to serve. That book talks about voter suppression in a way that eliminates our history, our painful history. But it also, if you read it today, puts in context the progress that we've made. Thank you again for being here.
Well, this question of young people and wait staff and what we're saying to people, I want to come back to that. That's important. So you know this, Jan, but you were shouted out here. So you know some specifics of this older controversy, the whole country's talking about it. So let's get that done out of the way. What's going to happen?
And if I can, if I may, sort of back up just a bit on what keeps me up at night, because it all fits back with what's going on now in the courts and in the legislature. And I want to read a quote from one of my favorite books, which is Theodore White's Making of the President, 1960. I'm a nerd. I read this every 4 years. And this is what he wrote back in 1960. Heroes and philosophers, brave men and vile, have since Rome and Athens tried to make the transfer of power work effectively. No people have succeeded at it better or over a longer period of time than the Americans. What keeps me up at night is increasingly our folks' abandonment of that principle. Process is more important than outcome. The process leads to the election of folks who have to make difficult decisions. A lot of the decisions that Mayor Franklin had to take as mayor, and Mayor Margaret had to take as a state representative, a state senator, Saxby Chambliss had to take as a senator, and I had to take as a majority whip in the Georgia House. Didn't fit an ideology, but it were hard decisions to face hard questions and deal with hard issues. And that's what we're talking about here today. And if you don't have folks' willingness to take those hard decisions and reach beyond, to drill down, then the democracy is in trouble. And then we're not going to be able to fix the problem that you're concerned about. And they don't fit ideologically. I mean, Mary Margaret was a Democrat, and I was a Republican in the House. And I went back and looked. I passed 42 pieces of legislation. She signed 12 of them. and I checked, Mary Margaret, you voted for 90% of them. That probably not going to help her. That's the fact of life, is that's what you have to do. And what concerns me is folks' attack on the process, unfair attacks on the process. And that's what we're seeing. I got appointed to the state election board in January 22 by a mutual friend of Mary Margaret's and I, David Ralston, who was the Speaker of the House. And he made a point of telling me that my job was to protect the process, was to root out wherever there were problems, expose those problems, fix those problems, but build a system that would do even better in 24 than it did in 20. And for 2.5 years, when I was serving on the board, I think that we did a pretty good job of that. And what has concerned me over the last 5 or 6 months is the erosion of that, in which folks, instead of working to gain faith in the system and to protect the system, have undertaken a cynical role to attack the system that is so important to our democracy. Because nothing is more important. I know 95% of the people here raise their hands Democrats. I want all of y'all, regardless of who wins in November, and Republicans as well, to accept the outcome. And what keeps me up at night is the cynicism toward the system itself that is threatening the very democratic institutions that we hold dear. Now, getting to your specific questions about what has taken place, I want to first sort of tell you that overall, the system is still good and still solid because we have 159 counties running the elections and they run it well. We have a good system in terms of getting people to vote. You know, you can start voting on October 15th and you can vote through election day through one of 3 different processes. What concerns me is some of the rules that have been put in place show a certain cynicism and quite frankly a certain ignorance as to how the system works. And like Mary Margaret, there are court challenges. I want to make sure y'all understand. There are court challenges by folks on both the right and on the left that filed lawsuits. The Democratic Party has filed lawsuits. Now it's going to be heard on October 1st, but there's a couple of very conservative groups that have also filed lawsuits, basically saying the same thing, that these unelected individuals are attacking the very core foundations of our party, of our system now. And so I do expect that the lawsuits probably will prevail. What concerns me is whether, in the long run, whether or not what is taking place that we're seeing over the last few weeks, few months, is adding to the cynicism and adding to more people questioning the legitimacy of the outcomes. Because that is truly when our system collapses, and that's when we're not going to be able to take on the hard issues that confront our country, particularly as we're talking here today about climate change. All these folks here who've been elected had to take on issues that didn't fit in ideology. That they were an issue. I want to steal one of your lines. Sorry, but I'm taking it. You made a point to us once. It's not right or left, but it's deep. And we've got to drill deep to fix this problem. And you can't drill deep to fix the problem unless you have folks that are being elected that the people have confidence in. That's what keeps me up at night.
So go right up to the left, go deeper. Senator, what keeps you awake at night these days?
Well, first of all, thanks for the invite to be here. Anytime I get to associate with former colleagues like this, I take advantage of it. And I'm not intimidated, obviously, knowing that, as Ed says, 95 of y'all are Democrats. My longtime dear friend that everybody in this room has heard of, if you will, whether you know him or not, but Dr. Jim Wagner, longtime president at Emory. Jim used to come see me, even when I was in the house. We became friends and come to see me regularly on the Hill, particularly looking for money. And we would have a great conversation, and he would always end the conversation as saying, Saxby, I really want you to come to Emory, to the campus, and speak to everybody. And he said, I will promise you I'll get both Republican students there. So, it's all upscale for Ed and I today. So, but we're not here as Republicans and Democrats. The project that Shirley and I, along with Governor Deal and Governor Barnes, is it's a strong bipartisan action around the country. The project that we are involved with has other states other than Georgia involved. All of these 7 so-called swing states have a group like Mary and Nathan and Roy and I. And the primary purpose, and it involves, Jim, what keeps me awake at night, the purpose is to ensure to people who have been voting all their lives when they could, when they got of age, who have no expectation of the integrity, the safety, and the security of the process. All of us, and a lot of you in here, have been involved in the political process for many years. And I went through 14 elections, about half and half as a senator and member of the House. I never worried about the outcome being in jeopardy. Thank goodness I only lost my first one, and it's always more fun to win. But I've had a lot of my friends who did not win. And I've been around the world as a member of the House and the Senate. I've been probably a couple of dozen times around the world. I've never tried to count it what percentage of the countries I went to were not democratic countries, but a lot of them. And every time you hear a dictator talk about his vision or his interaction United States, it's different. And with the versus, which would be a democratically elected leader, we are so fortunate as Americans that we have the foundation that's built around this country in the election process. The four of us have been very much involved in that for many years, and I'm telling everybody that I can in events like this that the foundation of the Georgia electoral process is solid. We have hiccups. We have 159 counties. There are multiple precincts in all 159. We have over 3,000 precincts in Georgia. That gives them a lot of opportunity for mischief to occur. And time and time it does. Some intentional and some not. But in all of the 14 elections that I went through, and I saw some of the issues that occurred that should not have occurred, not one single time did it really impact the election. And it was pretty easy for me after the 2020 election to receive a call from the Secretary of State and say, you know, I'm getting all these arrows thrown at me, and I know you're a pretty reasonable guy. I said, well, you ought to talk to some of those guys that didn't vote for me. They won't agree with that. But when he said, if you're willing to stand up and say that you thought the election was fair, I would like for you to do it. I said, Mr. Secretary, I'm eager to do that. And thank goodness, after all we went through from 2020 forward, the democratic process was carried out, and it was followed up with something that is so important to us, which is the right to anybody to go to court and say that I was wrong, and you need to rectify that or change whatever it might have been in the case of an election. Every time that election was challenged in court, it was always upheld as a valid and safe and secure election. So the four of us are fortunate to be able to get around the state and have conversations like this to talk with people who I will encourage you to carry that message. You really need to ask that number one question, are you going to vote? And hopefully, if they said no, you'll encourage them to vote. But you need to follow it up with a statement that, listen, your vote is going to count. And this process of elections in Georgia is safe and it's secure.
Representative Oliver, when Ed talked about some policy issues that you were going back and forth on and some you supported, I saw you nod your head to some of what he was saying. But this does go deeper than just normal, good, legitimate policy differences, which is good for democracy. So as you look at the process, the system, and the cynicism, what's the word that you have for Georgia voters on both sides? I would say I have a lot of my friends are Republicans. They can say that. And they're having, one of them talks about the GOP in exile. He's trying to figure out how to put the party back. So that's a whole conversation. My best friend in Washington was always Mark Hatfield from Oregon, who was a Republican. So nod your head, but things are deeper here than just policy differences.
Well, there are historical differences.
Yeah.
The history of the state, much of it is painful and much of it is unreconciled. So I've always believed that we would do well in America and well in Georgia and frankly in the city of Atlanta with a truth and reconciliation process that has been used in other places because there are many hurt feelings and there are many misgivings and misinformation. So, and I frankly think the faith community is a good place to have that conversation. And that faith leadership and fellowship are a good place to kind of wrestle with those questions. I believe what you said, which is that this is a fight for, it's a fight for the past that we're in. People are unsettled with the words of white supremacy, white Christian nationalism. I mean, we say the words, but we really don't delve into it and really don't call it out. It's not a comfortable place to be. It's not a safe conversation for many people to have. So I came to this gathering for similar reasons to the others, but because we do need to call it out. We need to call the balls and strikes. We need to call the history out and not just assume that all was well until 2020. And 2020 is an exaggeration, is an amplification of the issues that Americans face.
Not new.
But it is not new.
That historical point is so important for us to grasp. Every nation has their better angels and worse demons. And Andy Young could give a long reflection about his involvement in those better angels right here in Atlanta. But I would say the demons of race in this nation run very, very deep. And those demons are being manipulated right now. When a presidential debate has a candidate talking about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, stealing and eating people's beloved dads. And then it's still going on 3 weeks later. When's the last time you saw a news article stay in play? Because they're doubling down. And who are they lying about the most? Immigrants of color. It's getting worse and worse and worse. So Eddie Glauber, looking forward to my last book, says it well. He says, everything is falling apart and everything is possible at the same time. That's where we are right now. And so this isn't just for me a survival moment, to survive democracy, but what could be a transformational moment where we get to that history that Brian Stevenson says, I'm not trying to punish people, I'm trying to redeem our piece of slavery, never ended, it just evolved, now mass incarceration, policing and all the rest, you all know that well. But how do we look at this as not just survival, but transformation? How do we get to that place? Cynicism came up, several of you. Let's hear more about that. You raised it, and then we'll get it.
Cynicism is deadly. And the history of Georgia is based on race and region. All the decisions that come forward in the several hundred years, the race and region consideration. Those are very, very unresolved, difficult matters. I am thinking about the refugee community in Georgia, and particularly in DeKalb County, my home. in terms of the ways that it is, and the international community is changing the conversations in our General Assembly and our Senate. And it's worth mentioning because I think it is hope and the image of the successful refugee immigrant. My grandfather was an immigrant from Great Britain. The immigrants coming to DeKalb County now, who are getting up at 5 a.m. and going to work for $9 an hour in the chicken plants in Hall County because the bus picks them up at 5 a.m. Those people are driving this unbelievable successful economy we have in Georgia. The Haitian community in Ohio is driving the successful economy of the manufacturing business community that we all say we want to support. It's fascinating to me as I look around the unique success of DeKalb County's international community. Legal refugees who are populating, working in that waitstaff crowd I talked to, but almost every business. The majority of school systems now in Georgia that are Hispanic, in Dalton and various other places in North Georgia. When I went to North Georgia as a 23-year-old legal aid lawyer, there was no Hispanic workforce, and now the workforce for the successful businesses of North Georgia are significantly Hispanic, with majority school district populations playing football. So we have some hope to defeat the cynicism that I have to deal with every day in the political halls where I walk.
Ed, you had your hand.
Yeah, well, let me first give an invitation to y'all. If you want to see a break from cynicism, I want to invite you to something. I'm the chair of a charter school that focuses on refugee children. It's called Fuji's. I invite you to come visit our school. I invite you particularly to come visit us at our graduation ceremony. When you see these children who oftentimes come to our country after a hellish process to get into this country and their families, and see how they have, through our program at Fuji's, graduate and go on to live the American dream. If you need a little break from cynicism, come visit us in terms of having some faith in our future. That being said, get back to the dangers of cynicism. What is part of the scary thing? This gets back to this program. It's tough enough when we can agree on the problem, but we disagree on a solution, and that's when politics is at its best.
Yeah.
When we're having a debate, we have a problem with poverty, we have a problem with quality education, we have a problem with crime. We all agree that that's the problem, but we come to it from different perspectives. That's when the democratic process works. What's scary is when cynicism starts to dig so deep that we can't even agree that there's a problem. And that's the troubling thing about the issue of climate change, is that we have, through cynicism, a large number of people who can't even agree that there's a problem. That's when our democratic principles are most in danger.
Yeah. I think this question of a process, you all raised the process. That is what worries me the most. I did a podcast with Jocelyn Benson, Secretary of State of my home state of Michigan, came out yesterday. She's been in touch with your Secretary of State. It's a bipartisan conversation about the process of Michigan access. She's now having people come to her home and threatening her and her family. The head of Maricopa County elections, when I talked to him, I said, "What keeps you up at night?" He said, "Safety of my staff." These are like campaign workers. So the process itself is being attacked, intimidation is being threatened, corruption and subversion is being threatened here. So it's the process itself, I think, that's at risk now.
And it drives good people from being part of it.
Right.
And that's one of the most dangerous things when it comes to our elections. It's dependent upon individuals, okay? I mean, it's dependent upon folks showing up and being at the polls as poll workers. It involves folks being the poll manager. It involves folks working within the system. And the cynicism and that's taking place is scaring a lot of good people away. And I'll add that to my what keeps me up at night. Let me add that too.
Yeah.
Jim, and this is not a newfound idea. It's been creeping into the political system for years. When I was elected in 1994, that's the year of the contract with America. Newt was our speaker, and we took control of the House for the first time in 42 years. And I was a big believer in term limits and advocated and campaigned on it. But I realized quickly that the reason that our republic and our democratic way of operating our government depended on those smart, savvy, long-time guys and ladies who had been in the House or in the Senate, who could give us so much education that you would never know if you had been there 6 years or 2 terms in the Senate or whatever it might have been. And when I say it started creeping in. I've always had a bunch of good friends as Democrats. All of us who are longtime Georgians, if you were going to vote until probably got age 40, you had to vote Democratic if you wanted to vote. We had any number of conversations on the floor of the House with 6 or 8 or 10 of us just waiting around to vote and whatnot. And we realized that among our group, being about half Democrat and half Republican, that if it were really up to us, that if we could get the fringe out from the right and the left, and get the crowd in the middle, that we could get so much accomplished. But unfortunately, our political system doesn't allow that. And when I say, again, that this has been creeping up, when I got there in 1995, there were a handful of fringe on the right and a handful of folks on the hard left. Today, I dare say it's more like 20%. And it's pretty scary.
So, I was told there was going to be a gong about this time. So I haven't heard the gong, but we're going to finish this panel and go into our table conversations. Every movement has to figure out who they can persuade and who they have to defeat. Not violently, but at ballot boxes. And I didn't write this book, The False White Gospel, if I didn't think there were a lot of persuadables still out there. A lot of people are struggling with confusing. They don't know what to believe. Jesus said, you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free, meaning the opposite of truth is not just lies, it's captivity. It's captivity. A lot of people are stuck in the lies. How do we set the captives free? Even our own people, subject to so many lies. So I'm going to give the bishop, I think, from my schedule, is emceeing this little table talk, but I'm going to give you a chance to do a little benediction. It's not just interesting that we have 4 political people here. It's not just interesting. It is that. But it's crucial because all over the country I'm finding Republicans and Democrats who care deeply about what's going on. This election is not just another election. We use unprecedented over and over again. I use a biblical term. The biblical term for time that changes things is kairos. Kairos time. Not just chronos, tick-tock, tick-tock. Kairos means some moments can have impact for decades or generations. This election, in my view, is a kairos moment. And that's why I love your term, spiritual